I want to welcome you to this Wednesday evening service of First Baptist Church in Lucedale, Mississippi. One of the most beautiful pictures Jesus presented in the New Testament was that of the vine and the branches. In that parable, we learn something about Him and something about ourselves. On Sundays, we've been talking about the secret of living the Christian life. That secret is also spoken of here, as well as the tragedy of failing to realize that secret. Let me read you these verses from John 15, verses 1 through 8. Jesus said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vineyard keeper. Every branch in me that does not produce fruit, He removes, and He prunes every branch that produces fruit so that it will produce more fruit. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I in you, just as a branch is unable to produce fruit by itself unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown aside like a branch, and he withers. They gather them, throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you produce much fruit and prove to be my disciples." We see immediately that there are 4 subjects in this parable. First, there is the vine. Everything is really about the vine and all that is connected to the vine. The most important of all things is the life of the vine. Second, there is the vineyard keeper, the owner, the manager, the caretaker, the tender of the vine. The vine is planted for His purpose, for His glory. His concern for the vine is for it to be successful, so that it might bring Him greatness and glory. He is invested in the life of the vine. Then we find 2 different branches, or classes of branches. There are those that bear fruit and those that bear none. But the ultimate passion of the vineyard keeper is that any given branch bear much fruit. That, after all, is the purpose of the vine. The vine bears fruit through the branches. Some are successful in bearing fruit, and some bear no fruit. And if you know the character of a vine, you know that a branch that bears fruit one year may well bear no fruit the next year. So, what is the meaning of this parable, and how should it be applied to our lives? Well, remember, Jesus calls Himself the true vine. Does that mean there is a false vine that we should watch out for? No, that is not the meaning of what our Lord is saying here. He refers to Himself as the ultimate fulfillment of what God always wanted. If you go back to the Old Testament, you see something of the grief in the heart of God when His people failed to fulfill their purpose for life. God presents Himself in the book of Isaiah, chapter 5, as the owner of a vineyard who poured investments and preparations in establishing that vineyard. But it failed. It failed to produce what God intended. Instead of producing good fruit, it produced bad fruit. As a result, God's heart was broken. Listen to these words from Isaiah chapter 5, verses 1 through 7. God is speaking. "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it, and he looked for it to yield grapes. But it yielded wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard? that I have not done in it? When I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. And he looked for justice, but behold bloodshed, for righteousness, but behold a cry. You see, God's people failed to be what he wanted them to be. They failed to fulfill their purpose. They failed to bring him glory. They were the vine that disappointed, the vine that failed. But Jesus is the true vine. He is the vine that will bring God glory, the vine that will not fail. The type of vine Isaiah described was the soric. That was the finest and choicest of vines that could be planted. That, in fact, is the Hebrew word used here. But Jesus is the true vine, true to his purpose, true to his calling, true in contrast to all who came before who failed to bring God glory. Not only so, but the vine itself is pictured in the parable as the only source of life. When we are thinking of the branch apart from the vine, it's hopeless. All life comes from the vine. All fruitfulness comes from the vine and a vital connection to it. But before there can be fruit, there must be life. That has to be our first concern. It is our concern because he said of us that we are the branches. How does the branch live? It lives by the life of the vine. Its strength comes from the vine. Its success comes from the vine. So you will hear Jesus say in John 15:5, "For apart from me, you can do nothing." The picture there is of a total helplessness, thus our absolute dependency on the life of the vine. The vine is not the church. The vine is not a denomination. The vine is nothing less than Jesus himself. He is our life and our strength and our success. It all comes entirely from him. Now, this is in keeping with all that we've been looking at on Sunday mornings from the book of Romans. It's the same message. The second major picture is that of the husbandman or the vine dresser or the gardener or the caretaker. This is the one who owns and cares for the vine and branches. The vine is under his sovereignty. That is also pictured in another passage in the book of Isaiah. This describes the continual care of God over his vineyard. It's found in Isaiah 27, verses 2 and 3. We read, "In that day, sing about a fruitful vineyard. I, the Lord, watch over it. I water it continually. I guard it day and night, so that no one may harm it." So watched over are those who are the branches of the vine, that you are under God's care, his constant care, and under his sovereignty. He is your security. This security is expressed wonderfully in the first two stanzas of one of our great hymns. It reads thusly, "Day by day and with each passing moment, strength I find to meet my trials here. Trusting in my Father's wise bestowment, I've no cause for worry or for fear. He whose heart is kind beyond all measure gives unto each day what he deems best. Lovingly, it's part of pain and pleasure, mingling toil with peace and rest. Every day the Lord himself is near me, with a special mercy for each hour. All my cares he fain would bear and cheer me, he whose name is Counselor and Power. The protection of his child and treasure is a charge that on himself he laid. As thy days, thy strength shall be in measure. This the pledge to me he made." You see, this is my assurance as a branch who belongs to the vine. His sovereignty is my security. But along with that security comes severity. In verse 2 of John 15, Jesus said, "Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it, that it may bear more fruit." Andrew Murray, in his book, The True Vine, said this: "Consider what this pruning or cleansing is. It is not the removal of weeds or thorns or anything from without that may hinder the growth. No, it is the cutting off of the long shoots of the previous year. It is the removal of something that comes from within, that has been produced by the life of the vine itself. It is the removal of something that is a proof of the vigor of its life. The more vigorous the growth has been, the greater the need for pruning. It is the honest, healthy wood of the vine that has to be cut away. And why? Because it would consume too much of the sap to fill all the long shoots of last year's growth. The sap must be saved and used for the fruit alone. The branches, sometimes 8 and 10 feet long, are cut down close to the stem, and nothing is left but just 1 or 2 inches of wood, enough to bear the grapes. It is when everything that is not needful for fruit bearing that has been relentlessly removed that full, rich fruit may be expected." That was Andrew Murray's comment. You see, sometimes you and I begin to trust in our natural gifts and not in the life of the vine. Therefore, God has to bring us to the end of ourselves, to our wits' end, so that we come to realize that our only hope and our only help is the life that comes from the vine. So this parable is about security and severity, but it's also about sanctification. You might notice a difference in your English Bible in 2 significant words found in verse 2 and verse 3. In my Bible, it reads prunes in verse 2. In verse 3, it seems to change stream and uses the word clean. But in fact, the Greek word is exactly the same in both verses, and the word essentially means to cleanse. Our English word catharsis is built from this Greek word. So in both cases, we should think of a catharsis, a cleansing from all that doesn't belong. In this case, Jesus makes it clear that it is His Word that is the agent of cleansing. His Word will reveal to us individually and collectively what should not be part of our lives. It will, if allowed to do its work, remove from our lives all that hinders us from our purpose. Paul describes it this way in Ephesians. This is from Ephesians 5, verses 25 through 27. Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her so that He might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the Word, that He might present to Himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. The Greek word Paul uses for the cleansing of Christ by the washing of the water with the Word is exactly the same word used by John, translated prune or cleanse. It is a purging from all that contaminates the system, or in our case, all that hinders us from our purpose. Security, severity, sanctification. All of this relates to our service. Our single purpose is to bear fruit, and not to bear fruit in some meager supply, but to bear much fruit. Jesus said in verse 8, "My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples." Is the branch to get glory? No. The Father is to be glorified. When is the Father most glorified? He is most glorified when there is less of me, less of my life, less of my appendages, less of my purposes, less of my plans, less of my priorities, and more of His life in me. Then there is fruit. Our greatest struggle is to surrender our lives to the sovereignty of the vineyard keeper and to draw our life from the vine. It is to be willing to become less and helpless so that we might live in total dependence upon the life of the vine, that we might be of greater service and thereby bring greater glory to the Father. May that be true of us and our church. Thank you so much for listening.